Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Hope you're all doing amazing today. In this video, we're diving into the latest updates about Kelly Ripa and Mark Consuelos. You don't want to miss this. So make sure to stay tuned till the end and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. The silence of the early morning hours inside Newark Presbyterian Hospital was the kind that chilled even the strongest of spirits. The hum of machines, the clicking of nurses' shoes, and the muted whispers of doctors all merged into a haunting background that Kelly Ripa had come to know far too well in the past few days. For someone who built a career on energy, warmth, and a sense of lightness that viewers relied on every morning, Kelly had never felt more hollow. Inside the intensive care unit, behind a door marked with a yellow sign reminding visitors to sanitize before entering, her husband, Mark Consuelos, lay motionless. The steady beep of the cardiac monitor was the only reassurance that his heart, though weakened, was still fighting. What began as what doctors thought was a simple exhaustion-related episode had spiraled into something far more alarming. The couple, known to millions as a bright and inseparable duo, suddenly found themselves in the heart of a medical storm that neither fame nor fortune could shield them from. Kelly had been by Mark's side every hour she was allowed. She slept in the waiting room chairs, spoke in whispers even when there was no need, and carried herself with the quiet fragility of someone whose world had been tilted overnight. Fans had grown used to seeing her smile through anything, but here, under the fluorescent hospital lights, she wasn't the show host, the celebrity, or even the public figure. She was simply a wife terrified of losing the person who had stood beside her for nearly 3 decades. The first shocking update came 2 nights earlier, when doctors revealed that Mark's condition was far more complicated than they initially believed. A seemingly routine health issue had escalated into a combination of cardiac strain and a rare inflammatory response, something that left even the medical staff cautiously choosing their words. Kelly listened, trying to steady herself, but the ground beneath her felt unsteady. She asked question after question, her voice trembling as she demanded clarity. The doctor's explanations were careful, but every sentence felt like a weight dropping onto her chest. That night, behind closed doors, she broke down, silently, privately, and with a force she hadn't felt in years. But she never cried in front of Mark. Even in his fragile state, she wanted him to feel nothing but reassurance. She held his hand, combed his hair back, and whispered promises that she would take care of everything. And for a moment, whenever he opened his eyes, weak, tired, but still filled with the same warmth, she believed her own words. The situation became public when fans began noticing her absence from Live with Kelly and Mark. Substitute hosts were brought in without detailed explanations, prompting speculation that intensified quickly. Social media erupted. Where is Kelly? Where is Mark? Rumors spread, but Kelly remained silent, refusing to let anything pull her away from the hospital. When the official update finally came, a brief message confirming Mark had been admitted to the ICU, fans around the world responded with shock and heartbreak. The news hit harder than anyone expected. Kelly and Mark seemed invincible, the couple who aged in reverse, who laughed at adversity, who made life look effortless. Seeing them vulnerable, truly vulnerable, felt surreal for many who had followed their journey for decades. But this wasn't a storyline. This was real life, raw and unfiltered. Inside the ICU, Kelly lived in a rhythm dictated by visiting hours, doctor rounds, and the unpredictable rises and dips in Mark's condition. Some hours were encouraging, his vitals improved, his breathing stabilized. Other hours brought setbacks that left her breathless, gripping the edges of her chair as alarms rang and nurses rushed in. One particularly difficult morning, Mark struggled to stay awake. His voice was barely audible as he tried to speak. Kelly leaned over him, trying to catch every word. He told her not to worry, something he always said, even when he was the one lying in a hospital bed. She forced a smile, brushing his cheek, telling him to save his strength. But when his eyes closed again, she felt a fear so sharp it made her knees buckle. She moved to the hallway, pressing her hand against the wall to steady herself. A nurse approached, placing a gentle hand on Kelly's shoulder. "He's fighting," the nurse said softly. But Kelly's tears fell anyway. She couldn't control them anymore. She wasn't crying because she was losing hope. She was crying because of what hope required from her. Strength she didn't always have, patience she struggled to maintain, and faith she clung to even when it felt like sand slipping through her fingers. The ICU staff grew to know her well. They admired her devotion, her kindness, and the grace she carried even in her worst moments. She often brought them coffee or snacks, quietly thanking them for every gesture, every explanation, every reassurance. It wasn't for show, it was simply who she was. Meanwhile, fans continued flooding social media with messages of love. Stories poured in, how Kelly and Mark's chemistry helped people through their own dark days, how their marriage inspired others to believe in partnership. Kelly read some of the messages during late-night hours when sleep wouldn't come. They comforted her more than she expected. They reminded her that she wasn't alone in fearing for Mark's well-being. Still, not every update was positive. The inflammatory markers in Mark's body continued fluctuating. A secondary complication forced the doctors to run more tests. Kelly overheard scientific terms she didn't fully understand, but the tone of the conversations made her feel nauseous. On the fourth night, after a long series of evaluations, the head physician asked Kelly if they could speak privately. She followed him into a consultation room where the lights were dim, the chairs stiff, and the atmosphere unbearably heavy. She listened as he explained the situation, that Mark's response to treatment was inconsistent, that more aggressive interventions might be needed, and that the next 48 hours would be crucial. Kelly swallowed hard, nodding through the explanation even as her vision blurred. She felt the familiar sting of tears pressing against her eyelids, but she forced herself to stay composed. She needed to understand everything. She needed to be strong for Mark. After the meeting, she returned to the ICU and sat beside him. He was sleeping, his face calm despite the machine surrounding him. She reached for his hand, holding it tightly against her cheek. Quietly, she began speaking, not for him to hear, but because she needed to say it. She told him she wasn't going anywhere. She told him that their children were waiting, that their home felt empty without him, that the world didn't make sense unless he was standing beside her. She told him she loved him in 100 different ways, each one softer than the last. And then, finally, she allowed herself to cry, a deep, aching cry that came from a place of fear, love, and exhaustion. The kind of cry that breaks you, but also cleanses you. The irony was that even in this heartbreak, Kelly realized something profound. The depth of love she felt for Mark was even greater than she had ever understood. People often say that long marriages lose their intensity, but Kelly felt the opposite. This crisis had revealed just how intertwined their lives truly were. By the next morning, the medical team returned with new observations. Some were concerning, but others offered a glimmer of hope. Mark's heart was responding slightly better. His breathing was more stable. It wasn't a recovery, not yet, but it was a sign. Kelly clung to that sign as if it were a lifeline. Hours later, when Mark slowly opened his eyes, he saw her sitting in the same chair, her hand in his. She smiled through tears, and he squeezed her fingers gently. It was the smallest gesture, but it meant everything. For Kelly, it was proof that he was still fighting. The road ahead remained uncertain, filled with medical complexities and emotional challenges. But that fragile squeeze of his hand gave Kelly a strength she hadn't felt since they entered the ICU. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew they would face it together. And for millions watching from afar, the heartbreaking update had become a powerful reminder. Behind the glamour, behind the television screens, Kelly and Mark were a real couple enduring a real battle. And their story, full of love, pain, and resilience, was far from over. Kelly Ripa wasn't ready to give up hope. Not today. Not ever. Stay tuned for all the updates about Kelly Ripa. We are the first to publish all the information about Kelly Ripa and Mark Consuelos, so stay with us to get all the latest updates. And stay tuned to our Kelly and Mark report for all updates.